Hi everybody! I hope you're all having a good day. I hope you're all smiling and enjoying a lovely day. In this following tutorial, I'll be showing you on how to make custom emote toggles and custom eye blink animations for your VRChat avatar, such as eye jiggle or conditional blinks per emote. Now, before we get started, if you're new to VRChat conversions, please check the tutorial in the description below, and then you can proceed with this video. To start off, you need to make sure that you have your emotes planned. So in this case, we're going to be doing 5 emote toggles: angry, fun, joy, sorrow, and surprise. And we don't want these to mix into each other, so that's pretty much what we're going to do. But I'll make sure that I'll demonstrate an example toggle where, let's say if you have a heart eyes, star eyes, blush, or cheek puff, even something that should be mixable, I'll make sure that is demonstrated as well. Once you have your emotes planned, we'll need to make sure to add an FX Animator in order to do our toggles. So in case you don't know what an FX Animator is, it's pretty much in your avatar descriptor here. And there should be a section called FX. This can actually be used for so many things, such as clothing, emotes, tail or ear wag, or particles, or even magical girl transformation toggles. You can do so much with the FX Animator. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on create, and then we're going to add a folder. And we're going to name this FX Controls. You can name it however you want, but I'm going to go for that name. Then in the folder, we're going to right click again, click on create, and then we're going to add an animator controller, and we're going to name this FX. Then we're going to click on our avatar again, and make sure that for the animator, we add the FX animator here, as well as making sure that for the effects here, click on the default non-transform button, and then add the effects simply by clicking and dragging, just like that. Now, before we do any animation stuff, there may be cases where your avatar likes to disappear whenever you zoom into it, especially when you're animating the face. This is very common for void models, but some other models can do similar or even worse cases. In order to fix that issue, simply click on your game object, whether you have all your game objects, maybe some that are the specific ones that are doing the issue, or however you want. But make sure that for the game object that, which I'll scroll here and click on that arrow to close that, make sure that the update when off screen is checked yes. So that way it should be able to correct the boundary, like the bounds for your mesh. So that way it renders properly when you're animating. So let's go ahead and start adding animations. Now, we need to go into the animation tab. If you don't have this, you can simply press on Ctrl+6 in order to access the tab or make it appear. Or what you can do is go to the windows on the top part of Unity, then animation, and then animation right here. And it should be able to pop up right here. So we'll start off by making sure that our avatar is selected and that we click on the create button right here. Now, I'll say this in advance, but there are technically 2 methods on how you could approach the whole emote toggle via the animator, which is right here. But, I'll quickly go over that, but we're going to use the method I usually use with my clients. So we'll start off by making a neutral anim. What this neutral anim is for is that when you're loaded into VRChat or even Unity Play mode, it will pretty much have it where the emotes are zeroed out by default until you actually do the toggle. Therefore, eventually you could be able to do like the non-mixing with the expression, but we need to have a neutral for this. So have that, click on save, and then we're gonna go ahead right here on the bottom and you left click. We're going to click on create new clip, and you're going to make this for every expression that you want to make. So let's say I'm going to add the 5 emotes that I want for my character. So angry, then go here, sorrow, click there, and then joy, then fun, and then surprised. And we should be able to have all 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that's 5 right there. So you start off with that. Now, what you're going to then do after you have the emotes is that we're going to go into the neutral anim right here. we're going to go ahead and simply just click on the frame here, just so that way we're in it, the preview mode for the animation. So there you go. It should look like this. This is perfectly normal, don't worry. Now go ahead and find the game object, or just the, just the object right here. And you're gonna try to find the one that has the blend shapes. Again, whether it's face blend shape, it's a face object, body, whatever you named it, you can keep looking around. And if by any chance you still don't see your blend shape for whatever reason, I have a video in the description below that should show you how to make your blend shapes load if they work in Blender but not in Unity, because it's something wrong with how you exported it. So double check that. But if you have your blend shapes here, you should be able to find your blend shapes, and they should look like this. So this little tiny arrow has all your blend shapes here, and then you can drag through your the little sliders here, which changes your expression. So we will need to add keyframe for each of these. There are two ways you can go about adding keyframes. You can either press on the red button right here for auto keyframe and simply click and drag, or what you can do is simply right click on the expression and add a key. That's another way of doing it. So for this case, we want to make sure that we have our 5 emotes here, but they are set to 0 because it's neutral, meaning nothing is happening yet. So I'll go ahead and right click each of the expressions and make sure that they're all set to 0. Once you have that, you're going to go over to your timeline here, Control A to select everything, or just click and drag, Control C, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our angry, or whatever our next emote will be. So besides neutral, you'll have your actual toggled expression. So this will be angry. So Control V to paste, and what we're going to do is that we're going to make it where angry is going to be 100. The reason why we're pasting the entire thing, where rather than it just being a single keyframe like this, it's mainly because since we don't want the expressions to conflict or mix into each other, we're trying to tell Unity and VRChat that, hey, when I toggle angry, you have to make the other blend shape zeroed out. So that way, if let's say I'm going from angry to fun to sorrow to surprised, blah, 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 all that stuff, you're zeroing out the other expressions. So that's what you're doing. Then you have to also replicate for the other ones. So Control V, and pretty much you go, you add 100 to the expression that you want it to be. And you just kind of repeat like this. Simple repeat. You copy from neutral, you paste it to the expression you want, and you 100% what the expression is supposed to be. Just like this. So there you go. And now that we have our anims there, we will need to prepare the animator, because when it comes to Unity and also VRChat, but mostly Unity in general, we need to make sure that for the animator we define our conditions, like how, we need to tell it what parameters, how is it going to, all those controls, pretty much just conditions. So what we're going to do now, since we have this, is that we will go to our animator. Now, if you don't have this window right here, you can simply go to Window, then Animation, and then to Animator, and then it should appear right here. So what we're going to do is that right here, you'll notice that the neutral is orange. If something is orange, that means it is playing idly. That means the moment that Unity play mode is active, the moment you load into VRChat, the moment, this can even apply to Waterdo or VSF Avatar stuff, but once this thing right here is orange, it is going to play by default. So you want to make sure that neutral is set to that. If I were to have, let's say I right click and I set this one as default state, which I have this one orange, that means I'm going to be angry by default, so please keep that in mind. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to align these a bit just so it looks a little pretty. So we'll have that line there. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see. We'll go ahead and rename our base layer to Emotes. You can name it however you want, but I'm going to name mine to Emotes. And then what we're going to do is that we are going to add our transition lines. So let's go ahead and right click on neutral, make a transition, and we're going to go ahead and add one to each of these. So right click and then left click, right click, transition, and then left click. So that way it's to each of these. And then you're going to make it where from neutral to the arrow here, right? Because it's going there. We want to make sure that it goes back to neutral. So if I'm toggling from angry back to neutral, it needs to go back. So make transition again, and you're going to do it for each of the expressions, and it's going to look something like this. Now, there is also another method to this too, which again, it really depends on preference. I usually prefer to do this with my expressions, but the other method is pretty much, if I were to copy that, is where they'll have it where at any state, they'll make a transition, and this is what some people do, and they'll have it like this. I believe, depending on the transition between expressions or the neutral, I guess some people prefer how it looks, because I've seen this before. Sometimes it may not work, sometimes it does for people. So if you want to try this method, it is perfectly fine. There's really no correct way as long as it works for whatever you're trying to go for. But for my case, I'm not going to do that. But you can if you're going to go for any state or if you have something very complicated. But we'll go for this one because it works. So here. Now, what we're going to do now is that we need to go to, actually, we're going to go to our parameters here, and we're going to add a parameter. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, what in the heck are this? What is this for? So when it comes to the parameters, these are pretty much our conditions. So float is pretty much from 0 to 1, and of course it has decimals like 0.5, 0.3, all that stuff. This can actually be really useful for shaders, like, shader sliders or anything slider related. Let's say you have a hue controller, or maybe you want to adjust the speed on a wing or tail animation. This can be really useful for those kinds of things. Integer is pretty much whole numbers from 0 to 255, for example, where it can actually be really useful for what we're actually using for this case, where we have our emotes and we want it where this one, let's say this could be value 1, this could be value 2, 3, 4, 5. So this could be really useful for cases like that, or if you don't want things to mix, that could be useful for integer. They could be used for a lot of things, but that's an example use case. Booleans is pretty much true and false. So let's say you have a single toggle where it's like, oh, I want it where when I press this button, a hat appears, and then when I press it again, it turns off, or anything like really simple, true or false. If I press this, or if I do this, if it's true, does this. If it's false, that. True, false. Trigger is really useful for things like, it's a type of boolean where if you press on the trigger, it once a transition is over with the animation, it just resets. So it's useful for things like a gun, obviously, like a gun trigger, if that makes sense. So that's pretty much like example use cases of the parameters, but again, there is so much more on how you can use it. I'd recommend taking a look at the Unity documentation. You can even check out how other people use the parameters, because there are so many ways you can use these, and they're very powerful if you utilize them to the fullest of their capabilities. But for this tutorial, we will be using integer. So in this case, we're going to name the integer to emotes. And like I said, we're pretty much going to have it where from top to bottom, they'll have their numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there you go. Now that we have our emotes here, we're going to go and click on the arrows. So these arrows, this is pretty much when we're activating the emote, and then this is when we're deactivating the emote back to neutral. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, get rid of the preview. And what we're going to do first in the animator here is that we're going to disable exit time. Now you may be wondering to yourself, what is exit time? Exit time is pretty much, think of it like a delay. So when you have an animation, and this can especially go for, let's say you have like a blink idle with the emote, or you have some animation stuff going on. So if, let's say, you don't want to have any sort of delay occurring, you definitely want to keep this disabled if you want it really, really snappy. But let's say, for example, you have an animation where you want to have it where, let's say you press an animation once and you don't want it to loop forever. I mean, there are ways you can have it where it automatically ends. But let's say you have an animation that is allowed to loop, but then you want to turn it off manually or something like that, right? Then you can have it where if exit time is enabled, that after you turn off the, like, you turn off the parameter, you turn off the button, after 0.75 seconds, it will then fully finish the animation. So you have that exit delay of the transition. Now, there's even also transition duration and offset. This could be for more advanced stuff, again, if you want to change how the transition is and whatnot. But again, I usually have it where I don't use either of these because I tend to have it more snappier. But there may be certain cases where you may want to have like an extra delay regarding the animation transition. So you can play with those values if you so like. But what we'll do is that for pretty much each of these little arrows, we're just gonna disable exit time and set this to 0. So let me go ahead and do that for each of these. So take your time doing this. So again, disable exit time, make sure that's at 0, and go from there. Disable the time. And then once we have that, the next thing is adding the integer, the emotes here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by neutral to angry right here. So we're going from that. So we want it where angry is 1. Now we're going to go ahead and press on the plus right here. And then for emotes, we're going to have it where, again, this really depends on how you want. You could do so much with integers, but for my case, I typically use equals or not equals when it comes to the emote toggle. So we want it where if we have the parameter emotes and we have that equal to 1, it's going to trigger angry. That's pretty much what we want. And then what we'll have is that when we're going from angry to neutral, we want it where if it's no longer the value 1, it turns off angry. So right here, we're going to go to the conditions, press on the plus button here. Then we're going to have it where it's not equal to 1. So if it equals 1, it'll trigger angry, but if it's not equal to 1, it will exit the angry and go back to neutral. So we pretty much do the same thing with the others, where this is 1, 2, 3, so on. So for sorrow, we want that to be number 2. So back to conditions here, add the plus, and then we'll have it where if it equals to 2, it will trigger. But then we click over here for exit, press on plus, and then if it doesn't equal 2, it's not going to trigger anymore. It's going to go back to neutral, just like that. We'll press on that, and we just kind of like rinse and repeat pretty much. This will be 3 equals 3, press on the plus. This will not equal to 3 because it's going from joy to neutral. Back and forth, plus equals 4. So for fun, it has to equal 4, but if it's not equal 4, it's not going to do it anymore. And then the last one right here, this one will be 5. If it doesn't equal 5, it's not going to do surprise anymore. And just like that. So there you go. That's how you can at least make your emote, the emote animator here. But there is still more steps we have to do, and that is the VRChat menu. So let's go ahead and go back to our asset panel here, because like I said, for the VRChat descriptor, if you scroll down over to your expressions, this is required in order to properly utilize your effects and other toggles. So menu and parameter. What we're going to do is that we're going to right click in our folder here. We're going to click on create, go to VRChat, avatars, and then we'll have our parameters. So I'm going to name this one Param, and then I'm going to right click again, click on create, VRChat, avatars, and then our menu. And I'm going to call this one, let's say main menu for now. So main menu, and then I'm going to duplicate this once more, and I'm going to call this one, right click, rename emotes. This is just so that way you have the habit where in the case you want to add even more stuff, you kind of know like how to make that main menu sort of thing so you can have more menus. Now, we're going to go into parameter real quickly here. Now, you can delete these default ones because they're not necessary unless you end up needing to use them. Whether it's like, let's say a VRC Fury package prefab thing you got that requires this, but I'm going to have it where I'm going to delete these because we're not using it, but we're actually going to rename this one to Emotes because this is the parameter that is in our animator right here. So we want that to be detected, and we are going to make sure it is integer like this. So that way it will make sure that it actually detects the correct type of parameter. You can also have it where, let's say, if you want a different value defaulted, where maybe you do want to be angry by default, you can have it where here can be default. But we're going to leave that to 0 for now. So once you have that, we're going to go over to our main menu right here. And then we're going to click on the plus button right here, and we're going to name this into Emotes. Then what we'll do is that for the type, we're going to make this into a sub menu. And then we're going to click and drag the emotes menu here, right there. So, like I said, just so you can have a habit of knowing, like, okay, you can make your main menu, then you can have all your stuff. You can have your emotes, your clothing toggle, rainbow toggles, all that crazy stuff. So, once you have that, you're going to go into your emotes here, and this is where we're going to add our 5 emotes here. So, click on the plus button, and then what we're going to do is we're going to name this one to Angry. And then the type of button, this really depends on how you want to do it. You can have it as button where you press it once and then after the animation done can be finished. But we're going to have it as toggle instead because we want to turn it off and on, manually. So we'll have that toggle, and then we'll have it where for parameter, parameter here is actually, oh yeah, that's right. We have to make sure that parameters here is loaded. So make sure you click and drag your param here, click and drag it up here, and there you go. Then it can properly detect. There you go. You should also probably do the same thing for main menu just in case. It's not, shouldn't be mandatory, but we can have it there just in case. So once we have that, emotes here, we'll then go back here, press a plus, and then we're going to add our sorrow, and we kind of just add from here all our emotes. So we'll press on joy, then we'll press here for fun, add that, and then we'll add surprise. So then right here, we'll have to make sure to specify the value. So for angry, we want that to be 1. Sorrow is going to be set to 2. Then for joy, we want that to be set to 3. Then for fun is 4. And then surprise will be 5. Just like that. And there you go. You should be able to have it where now your toggles should be working fine. So we can go back to test share right here, or our avatar, and then we're going to scroll down and make sure that our menu and parameters here are registered. So drag parameters here, and then we can drag our main menu over here. Just the main menu. The main menu will detect the emotes here, so it will be a chain, and there you go. Now, there is actually a way to properly test out if your toggles work before even going into VRChat. So in your VRChat Creator Companion, you can actually download Gesture Manager. I should have in the description where you can find Gesture Manager because it's a really useful tool. I heavily recommend it. So make sure you install it via VCM, and then once you have that, you can then simply choose a newest version on the top, let that install, and just give it some time, and then we can go into testing our emails just to make sure that they work properly. So there you go, it's kind of loading there. Alright, once we have Gesture Manager properly installed, we can then go over to Unity, which will, of course, load the package for us. So give it some time for that thing to load up. And once we have that downloaded, there should be a tools option up here, which is called Gesture Manager Emulator. You can add that there, and there should be a prefab that appears. This prefab will allow you to enable play mode here, so that way it can properly work. So simply click on enter play mode, and then if by chance you have any other errors, try your best to decipher what the error could be by looking at keywords, so that way you can try and debug. If it says something about complaining about parameters, you may have too many parameters that you may have to delete. If you have any errors like, oh, you have the autofix, like say you have VRC Fury installed, and you have some prefabs, just let it autofix. You know, just take some time to try and decipher the error by using keywords. Now, once you have Gesture Manager triggered here, you can then scroll to the Gesture Manager here, and then under Expressions, you can then find your menu here, Emotes, and then we can be able to trigger the emotes accordingly. And as you can see, I'm able to click through them. I'm able to like click between them, and they're not glitching into each other. It works perfectly fine. And I can even have it where it toggles like within itself, so it works really well. I can literally just spam these expressions, no clipping happening. So there you go, really nice. And then you can of course exit play mode by simply pressing the play button on the top, just like that. Now, I did mention that I will be showing you on a way that you can make like a dedicated toggle for mixing. Let's say heart eyes, star eyes, cheek puff, you know, those type of things where you want it to mix with all your other emotes. So what we're going to do in this case for Tesh-chan, we're actually going to make a cheek puff toggle. So go ahead to your character here, go back to animation, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a new clip. So let's say, for example, for cheek puff, I want it where by default cheek puff is not enabled. So we'll say no cheek puff, and then you can just simply just have no, and then whatever you want the toggle to be, so that it's not active. So press on save, so no cheek puff, and then we'll go back here, click on create new clip, and then we're gonna have cheek puff like that. So press on save. And what we're going to do is that we're going to click on the timeline, and then we're going to have it where we're going to animate the keyframe. So click on the body here or your game object, and then you're going to find the expression that you want triggered, whether it's, you know, maybe fang toggles or something, but we're going to try and find cheek puff, which should be hiding right here. So we're going to use that. So we want it where in this toggle, this is enabled. So I'll make sure to add a keyframe, right click here, add key, and then make sure that that is set to 100. So I'll right click update key to make sure it's updated. Therefore that is 100. And then I'm going to go back here and then click on no cheek puff, and I'm going to have it where for this one, I want to set to 0 instead, like that. So there you go. Now that we have the cheek puff toggle, or at least our mixable toggle there, what we're going to do is that we're going to go back to the animator that we have here. Also make sure this is zeroed out. But over here in our animator, we will see that there'll be more of our little animations here. These two little boxes. So we're going to go to layers. We're going to add a new layer, and we're going to call this one cheek puff. Then we're going to click on the gear and make sure that the weight is set to 1. Then go back to emotes. Then we're going to copy this, so Control-C, then Control-V, and then drag these over here. I'll also make sure that under emotes that we delete this as well. So go back to cheek puff here. We want it where the no cheek puff is default, so right click and make sure that this is set as default state, because by default we don't want our cheek puff to be activated. We want that as a toggle. So for this one, we're going to right click here, make a transition, and then add it to cheek puff, and then right click again, make transition, and go back, like so. Now we're gonna make a parameter. Now for this case, because it's a simple setup, right, we're going true and false because we're flipping between just two different states. So we will want it where for our parameter, we're gonna use the boolean instead. So we'll have this one as cheek puff, like that. So we're gonna go ahead and in our arrows here, we'll drag this down, and we're gonna have it where we have the exit time be disabled. You can, of course, have the transition duration to be, like let's say 0.1 if you want, but up to you if you want to have some delays or time, transition stuff. I'm gonna have it where it's just they don't exist. So it's like snappier. Alright, so click on the plus button right here. So we're gonna go from no cheek puff to cheek puff. So we want it where this will be using the parameter cheek puff here. And we want it where if it's true, then we're going from non-cheek puff to cheek puff. And by true, it means that if this box here is enabled, like this, it will trigger it. But if it's disabled like this, it's not going to trigger it at all. So, cheek puff, have that true. For the exit here, cheek puff to no cheek puff, then we're going to have it heart plus here, cheek puff, then have that as false. This can go for heart eyes, star eyes. Again, like you can just apply the knowledge. So if it was heart eyes, this will be no heart eyes, then will be heart eyes instead. This will be no star eyes, no blush, so on. Even face shadow. So there you go. Now once you have it where the condition is set up here, we're then going to go over to project and then back to our param here. And we're going to click on the plus button right here. We're going to name this to cheek puff instead, or wherever your extra toggle is. And we're going to make the type set to Boolean. Then we're going to go into, let's say we'll add it to our emotes here, because why not? And then we're going to press on the plus again. Then we're going to name this one to cheek puff. And then we're going to change the parameter to cheek puff here. And we'll make sure that this is true. If you have it vice versa, you can change the value, but we're going to have it where it's enabled. And once we have that, we're going to go back to gesture manager here, enter play mode, and then give it some time for it to play. And once you have that, you can then scroll down, go to your expressions, then go to emotes, and then find cheek puff. And as you can see, there you go. If I want this smoother, I could just make the transition duration to, like I said, 0.1, 0.05, however the speed. But yeah. And then you can have it where, with your other expressions, it will mix, as you can see. Just like that. Now that we have our expressions going on here, non-mixable and mixable blend shape here, now let's get into adding our custom blink animation. So you can go ahead and exit play mode here, and this is where we can begin doing that, starting off with clicking on our avatar here and scrolling down to the avatar descriptor, and we're going to take a look at the eye look, since usually you'd want to have this set up, because this is where you can actually set up your blinking. Let's say, have this as blend shape, have all that stuff there, and even have your eye bones. But if we want to have custom blinking animation, where maybe you want it where, again, you want your eye jiggle, or per emote you want it where, okay, I have this expression going on and I don't want the blink to interfere with the emote, for example, right? So in that case, we'll have to make sure that eyelids is set to none. Now, if you want to keep the eye bone rotation, right? Because with VRChat, the way the eye bones work is that, let's say if an object is nearby, your eye bones can automatically track the object, which is pretty nice. So if you want to keep the VRChat eye bone set up, then you can leave this enabled like so and copy the setting. If you want to have full control over the eyes, where you don't want your eyes to just look at objects and stuff, you want it to be fully controlled by you, then you can have it where you just straight up disable the eye look, which is what I will be doing. I will pretty much animate the eye movement, and I will be animating the blink as well, fully custom. Once you decide whether you want to keep the eye bones, the VRChat ones, or not, what we're going to then do is that we're going to go back to our avatar, back into animation, and we're going to click here, create a new clip, and we're going to call this one idle blink, like so. Click on save, and then this is where we're going to animate the eye blink. So I would probably click on here to enable the auto keyframe, and then what we're going to do is that we'll select our object here with all our blend shapes, and we're going to start off by animating our main blink frame. So we probably would want it where for a couple seconds, let's say maybe 8 seconds or something like that. We start off by having like how long till the blink actually triggers. We'll start like quite far, but we'll still adjust accordingly. So just starting off here where we start here, we just randomly keyframe the blink to 100% like this. And then over here, we can keyframe this to 0. And same thing over here. Just start like random, like a random place to start off with. And then from there, once you have your main 3 keyframes for your blink, which you can adjust here, like you can start off with like determining how the timing is for the blink itself, like that. Do you want it to be slow or do you want it to be really fast? So you can start adjusting those little frames. I think I might want mine a little bit slower. Just a little bit. Like that. So that's how I want my blink to look like at first. So I'm going to select these keyframes, Control C, and what I'm going to do is that starting on the 0 seconds, I'm going to pay attention to my IRL self on how I blink. And that kind of helps give you a bit more of a realistic idea on the timing for the blinks by just paying attention to how you blink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to press the space bar and I'm going to wait until I blink. And I just blinked right there. So I'm going to paste the keyframes here for blink. And then what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete this one here. Actually, no, I'm going to make this a little further because I don't want it to loop back and forth. I want to give it time for it to play so I can time it right. So I'm going to go here again after I blink. Give it some time. I just blinked again here. And what I can do just to make it a little cuter is I can make it have a double blink here instead. So it can do that. So really just up to you on how long you want it. I recommend make it as long as you can. Not crazy long, because again, it will be looping. It's going to keep looping all the time, so don't worry. So I'm going to do one more keyframe here. I somehow blinked there. So there you go. I can delete this one. And what I'm going to do actually is that I'm going to have a little buffer. So I'm going to copy that last frame here where there's no blink. And I'm going to make it where after a couple seconds here, let's say over here, we're going to have it where it doesn't blink. So when I press on play, it's going to have a blink like that. And again, you can adjust it if you feel like maybe it's too long of like a blink spacing. So, but this actually works pretty well as a base. Now that you have at least your key on at least the start of how the blink should be and the timing, you can then add more to it. You can add more expressiveness. So for this model, Tesh-chan, she actually has eye jiggle blend shapes or the highlight stuff. So we can actually use this. Again, you'll have to, depending on your model, some models don't come with extra blend shapes to adjust the eyes or the highlights. Some do, especially booth models. If you bought one, they definitely should have a couple that you can use to fake eye jiggle. But from here, I'm going to zoom in and we're going to start off with this keyframe here. So what I want is that when the eyes are closing, I want it where, let's say maybe the eyes get a little bigger, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to make it where, I'm going to use big pupils here. I'm going to make it where the eyes get a little bigger. Just a little bit. So, and then we also have to make sure that there's a 0 too. So we got to make that 0. And then it will animate like so. And then when the eyes are back here, we can then make that 0. So, pupil. And you can see how we have that. I also probably would want it where maybe the blink stays a little longer. So I'm going to copy that blink, the blink keyframe, which I can scroll out here so I can know which is which. So that little keyframe there, I'm going to copy Control C, Control V, and kind of make it where it stays just a little bit longer. So that way it doesn't exit too quickly. Okay, maybe make that a little shorter. There you go. And then put that there. Like that. So we have our blink there. Then what we'll do is that I want to have it where after the blink ends, the eyes kind of dilate. So we're going to have small pupil. I'm going to make that kind of small. Might make that a little later. Make that 0. Small pupil. And you pretty much just apply the knowledge when it comes to like, again, just using auto keyframe or right click keyframe. And it's just all about playing with the keyframes here and just see, just play around with it. Don't be afraid to touch it. Even if it don't look good, hey, just have fun with it. Just have fun, be creative. So let's adjust this a little more. We can have it where it does like a double jiggle to the eyes. So might want to make that timing a little faster. So I'm gonna have I'm gonna actually have my little frame indicator here. I'm gonna then click here so that way I can scale it like this. Maybe make that a little slower. And then I'll probably actually delete this frame, and then let's see if this will work better. Just something like that. Starting off with something, you keep going from there. And we'll go for that. It ain't gonna look perfect. This is a tutorial. This would take a while, and I don't want to take too much of your time. So at least we have something. We can even add, let's say, our highlight rotation, where maybe when the eyes are going down, the highlights rotate. So we can use maybe this one and kind of add from there. So do that. Highlight, rotate, and then when the eyes are opening, the highlight returns back, and then we can use the inverted blend shape here that I have to do that. And again, just keep in mind that you still have to make sure that there's at least a start point per blend shape. So again, the highlights need to have their start of 0, and then you have the value from there. Again, pretty much just seeing how I animate, you can see what I mean. So we have it rotate. It's kind of gonna have a bit of a delay, so that. And then we rotate there. Looks a little silly, but you can see what I mean. And you can again adjust the timing however you like, but you can be able to do eye jiggles like that. There you go. You can even, like, I don't know, I'm trying to give you ideas here. You can even do like eye wide, where let's say we want the eyes to widen up. So I believe that shape, that blend shape should be here. No, not that one, not browse. I'm looking for this one. Well, not exactly that one, but it'll work. Actually, wait, no, this one. This one was a blend shape. Realize that. Okay, so I want it where when her eyes do that, it will widen, and then when it goes that, it kind of just does a little bit of a jiggle to it. Like that. And then, yeah, it's still very rough. I probably would slow this down, or at least make it a little bit more gentle. Actually, yeah, I'd probably make this more gentle, but it's, again, like I said, this is just demonstration of what you could do with it, but you definitely would need to spend a lot of time perfecting it. And, you could just mess around with the timing, maybe make it slower. If you feel like it's going too fast or too choppy, you could probably slow it down. That might help it out. But there you go. See? Now it's improving. And obviously with more work, it could be much better. But at least you can see that there's eye jiggle. And then from there, you can actually, like, once you are really happy with your eye jiggle as is, for the blink, you can then pretty much replace the existing blinks here. So I can replace this one with this, and I will have to readjust the timing again, but that's perfectly fine. But at least, like, we had our plan, then we kind of add more details, and then we go from there. There you go. And now you can simply, after you paste your frames there, you can then press play, and then you can see the eye jiggle would work. And you see the blink. I probably would make it where I'd modify, like, if you're gonna do like a double blink like that, I probably would modify it where at the ending part of it, it kind of ends a little quick because you're gonna blink real quickly. So like this maybe? Let's see. I wouldn't have the eye wide, not gonna lie. I probably would get rid of that here. Like that. Something like that. But again, you know, it's really just up to you on what the heck you want. And there you go. You can have your eye jiggle with your blinks. So that's pretty much how people with the eye, you know, the live 2D-esque eye blink for VRChat, they pretty much do that. It's all about animations. So once you have the blink of how you want it to be, pretty much in your animator, all you really just need to do is that you go to your layers, and you have to make sure that this idle blink here has its own layer. So press on the plus button here. We can call this one idle blink, like that. Make sure that, I'd say, we'll put in the top here. And I'll make sure also that the weight for emotes is set to 1. So idle blink will be on the top. And then, and also, weird thing about Unity, by the way, top, like this here, just because the layer is on top, that doesn't mean it's actually quote unquote top. So let's say if you ever have an expression, like is a future note, if you ever have expression where they want to conflict with each other with mixing or something like that, maybe try readjusting, or just keep in mind that technically, according to Unity, the most toppest layer is actually the bottom, and then the bottom of the layer, kind of like Photoshop layers, it's actually, it's inverted somehow. I don't know why. I've experienced the issues before. That's a Unity thing. It's kind of silly. But you're gonna click, I mean, I could be wrong about that, but it's an experience. But right here on idle blink, I'm gonna Control C, and I'm gonna add that to idle blink layer, Control V, and have it like that. So there you go. And this could be like, again, really simple of, okay, you got custom blink and you have your emotes here. So, you know, for the most part, that's kind of it. Now, there's one more thing as well. What if you want to be even more particular and you want custom blinks per emote? So for this case, you pretty much, for your emotes, you'd have to animate the blink within the emote itself, so that way it's particular and that, you know, looks good. So I'd say, like, in that case, you can have it where you can actually get rid of the idle blink layer and have it where instead of the neutral, like the neutral anim I have here, you can have it where that's actually the blink instead. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna go and find my idle blink, which actually I did deleted it, my bad. So let me Control V and add that back. So I'm gonna keep idle blink here, but I'm gonna make, actually I'm gonna change the layer so that way that's zeroed out for now. So for the emotes here, we're gonna go to our animator, we're gonna go into idle blink, we're gonna do Control A, Control C, then we're gonna go into our neutral expression here, and we're gonna Control V for the, to add our blink keyframes here. So therefore, by default, the neutral will have the blinks, but what will happen is it'll probably still blink, and this is where I'll get into where you can actually have it where some expressions don't have blink, and then some expressions will have blinks. This can get a little complicated, but try to follow along as best as you can, and slow down the video if needed. So what you'll do, since we have this blink now at neutral, we want all the expressions to have their own blink. So let's start off with angry, where for angry, let's say maybe we want to have the blink. So we're going to do Control V in this case, and we're going to have it where, you know, angry will have the blinks. But maybe let's say for an expression like joy, we don't want to have any blinking occurring because we don't want clipping to happen. So in that case, you'll then go to your neutral expression and you're just going to copy the first frame here, Control C, and then you'll actually go to your joy expression, then Control V. So that way, when joy is occurring, it's going to zero out the blink shape key, or the blink blend shapes. Blend shape keys, so much conflict with that word. So there you go. Now, again, keep in mind too, is that depending on how many blend shapes you want to use, especially like for your blink and then per emote, make sure that every blink blend shape is registered on every single emote. Because let's say, for example, I were to, I don't know, add like a, let's say I want the highlight up and down shape keys, and I want that only for the sorrow, so it does the sorrow like jiggle animation, right? You have to make sure that the other expressions are zeroing out the keyframes for the sorrow. So if you're switching in between them, you don't want it where the sorrow animation where the eyes look like they're crying to also be on the other emote. So make sure that they all pretty much start with the same blend shape. All these blend shapes have to be registered on all of them. But after the first frame will depend on what they do. Whether they will do normal blink, whether they're gonna do a custom sorrow blink, whether they're gonna not blink at all. Yeah, keep that in mind. It's a lot, but I hope what I'm saying is making sense. So yeah, but what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna go back to idle blink here. So I'm gonna actually copy the blinks for all of them, except obviously joy is not gonna have the blink. For sorrow, I'm gonna add really just one little blend shape, and just to kind of show you what I meant by they all need to have the same thing. So let me go to fun here. I'm gonna paste the blink, and then surprise, I'm going to paste the blink here. So they should all have it. Sorrow, I'm going to add it, but let's say if I want to have it where it's crying, or maybe the highlights here have to be bigger or something, I'll add I'll do the auto keyframe, go to my game object, and then I'm going to find the extra blend shape that I want specifically for sorrow. And I want that to be giant highlight, like this one or something. And then maybe I want where the highlight is down so it looks more sad, like that. In that case, make sure what you do is that keep in mind the blend shape that you just registered. For me, it's highlight big, down. Yours could be like 2 or 3 of them. And then what you're going to do is that you're going to find the blend shape that you just registered here, right? So I have this as 100 by default. I'm going to do Control C. Make sure those two are selected. Control C. And then you have to go to each of the emotes here. So for angry, Control V. But then for the values, I'm going to zero it out like that. So that way it's not going to trigger. Because if I were to, because again, if they weren't registered to begin with, they would probably just, again, conflict where it'll end up looking like this when you're toggling in between. So, like I said, gotta zero out the expression, like that. So, make sure you do that. And then you go from there. You then add it per every other expression besides sorrow, like so. You also gotta add to neutral too. Yep, add that to neutral. Then surprise, and then there you go. You do not have to add to cheek puff because cheek puff is a mixable, like it's able to mix, so it's perfectly fine. You don't have to touch those type of controls. It's mainly the emote ones where they cannot mix into each other. They have to have the same blend shapes registered, whether they're zeroing it out or they're not. So there you go. And once you have that, you can then go back to gesture manager. Then you can press on enter play mode, like so. And then from here, we'll see if the blink idle works. As you can see, the eye jiggle is working. We're going to go into expression, emotes, and we're going to go into joy. I think joy accidentally zeroed out the expression. Yep, I didn't register the joy expression. Hold on. Let me add that. So go here, there. Joy was not registered. That explains everything. So you gotta go back and debug. Always gotta double check. Did you register something? Is something missing? So enter play mode. Go back there. And then, once again, see if it works. It works. Joy expression finally works. And as you can see, for Joy, you don't see any blinking happening. No clipping. And then for Fun, let's see if it'll work. There you go. See? The custom blink is working. And you can adjust it if you see clipping. Adjust it from there, but the blinking is working. And then you can have Surprise, which will have the blinking. Like that. And then for Sorrow, we have it where the highlights are working. So it should be able to do its jiggle, like that. All good. And there you go. That's pretty much how you can make custom blinks, and even on a per emote basis, so that way it works perfectly fine. And I hope I tried my best to make sure that I don't get as confusing as I can. Like, I don't want to get confusing, but trust me, there is a lot when it comes to setting up the VRChat stuff. So pretty much in a nutshell of what we did is that we made sure that there's obviously a VRChat descriptor, that we have our effects layer right here, the animator, so we make sure we have that added, and then we went ahead and added our neutral expression with all of our emotes. Then we made sure that there is an animator that has neutral by default, and then we have transition in between from our toggleable expressions to the neutral, like so. So there's these little arrows. We made sure that there is an emote parameter which is set to integer, since we want to switch in between them and make sure that they're not mixing into each other. And then we also made sure that the transition stuff is disabled, since we want it to be more snappier, but of course you can add it, add the transition stuff if you like. And then once we have our emotes there, we made sure that there is the menu and parameter assets here. So we made sure that was added to our folder by right-clicking, creating our stuff here, like this, like so. And then once we have that, we made sure that our parameter was configured so we have our emotes, even our cheek puff as well. Then we have main menu, add the emotes, and then we made sure the parameter up here is properly registered so it can automatically detect what is any new parameters that are added here, like so. Made sure that we configured all this, and then we use Gesture Manager, which is I heavily recommend. Please make sure you install it. And we tested our emotes there. We even added an idle blink, which, depending on your use case, you can have a very simple one where it's just on an individual layer, or you can have it where it's on a per emote basis, where neutral will have the idle blink, but then depending on the expression, they'll either don't have it, or maybe they'll have a slightly modified version of the idle blink, or they'll just keep doing the blink there. So there you go. And of course, there may still be some debugging things that you'll have to do. So maybe you may have forgotten something, or maybe something broke or anything like that, and you may have to double check, back and forth, depending on what the issue is. It can, again, it's a case-by-case basis, so, there's so many answers that can fix some issues, but that's pretty much in a nutshell of what we did. It's, again, hefty tutorial, but I do hope it breaks it down in as much pieces as possible, so that way you can at least understand the basics of the emote toggle, but also how to make the custom blink idle at the same time. And yeah, I do hope you have a lovely day, and please take care of yourself. Thank you to all my Snowflake members. In case you don't know, I have YouTube membership, so if you want to further support this channel and what I do, then feel free to join the Snowflake members. Otherwise though, just your support means so much to me, and I appreciate every ounce of it. Either way though, with that being said though, hey, goodbye everyone! I hope to see you guys next time, okay? Bye bye!